We finally have the Switch 2 in hand, and with it, its keystone launch title. Mario Kart World is an integral part of the Switch 2 rollout, as the system's biggest day one experience. There's little doubt it will shift tens of millions of units, but questions remain about the game's graphical fidelity, and the merits of its mechanical overhaul from prior Mario Karts. So is Mario Kart World a worthy open-world racer? And does it pack great graphics to mirror its revved-up reinvention? Last month, Nintendo revealed Mario Kart World began life as a Switch 1 title, a game built for the much more constrained Tegra X1 based hybrid. That provoked some interest online. If the core of Mario Kart World could work on the original Switch, why is it only on Switch 2? I think the final game provides some clear answers. World's fidelity and scope would be tough to match on Nintendo's last-gen juggernaut. Mario Kart 8 provides us with some useful context. This smaller, more track-oriented title shipped on Wii U in 2014, and Switch 1 in 2017 in visually upgraded form. It perhaps doesn't reflect the peak of what the OG Switch might have been capable of, as we never got a proper Switch-exclusive Mario Kart entry. But it does reflect the previous high watermark for the series' visuals, and remains one of the best-looking racing games on Switch. The most obvious upgrade comes down to scope. Mario Kart World features a vast, interconnected world linked with kilometers upon kilometers of track. You can see structures spanning the entire horizon when you cruise through the game world, something that Mario Kart 8 never had to contend with. A sense of distance is preserved through the use of volumetric fog, along with strong bloom to emphasize the dazzling exposure of the sun set against terrain. The game uses a discrete LOD system, but detail-level transitions are fairly unobtrusive and kept to a minimum for the most part. Pop-in for elements like grass and cars is not terribly obvious, and it's made more subtle with the GPU-sparing dithered fade. Plus, everything is built to a reasonable level of detail and artistic quality, even in segments you don't reach in the game's races. Sometimes you can make out a bit of conspicuous texture tiling, but it's not common. Mario Kart World portrays a stable, consistent-looking open world better than any original Switch game that I can think of. I think this is the key reason Mario Kart World isn't a Switch 1 game. The compromises would be very large relative to what we're seeing here. Plus, the racer count in World gets doubled from 12 players to 24 players, increasing the visual mayhem. But there are also some key visual quality advances that Mario Kart World makes relative to its last-gen predecessor. The biggest shift lies in lighting. Baked lighting returns in Mario Kart World, with the game relying heavily on light maps. The game's pre-calculated direct lighting mirrors Mario Kart 8, with only limited use of real-time shadows for player vehicles and certain bits of trackside detail. But the indirect diffused lighting is higher quality, with clear bounce light contribution, producing an effective sense of GI. All throughout the game world, you can notice subtle illumination on shadowed surfaces hit by reflected sun rays. Some of these effects were captured in Mario Kart 8, but the lighting was rather low resolution and not as pleasing. Mario Kart World also features a time of day system, which would usually mesh somewhat inelegantly with that baked lighting, but Nintendo has an interesting solution. The game actually just swaps between 4 predefined times of day, which also changes the pre-calculated lighting. The position of the sun and moon are also fixed, except at dawn and dusk. And even when the sun is just coming up over the horizon, World's real-time shadows remain permanently fixed at a kind of mid-afternoon angle. I don't think this is a major issue, but it can look a little awkward, mostly when the sun is clearly set against the horizon and the light angle discontinuity is obvious. But as a trade-off, Mario Kart World has excellent lighting quality for a racing game. You can also expect to see real-time weather changes, which look convincing enough. Mario Kart World does rely extensively on real-time lighting for its reflections, however. If you look closely at the way the reflections behave here, in particular the kind of inaccuracies in perspective, it looks like the game makes heavy use of real-time cube maps. These are applied to certain glossy surfaces, including the game's water. The cube maps usually look pretty decent when they're applied to a surface underneath the player, especially with rough waves. But their low resolution can stick out sometimes, and they only update every few frames, so they lag a bit when the player is moving. Other vehicles aren't captured in the cube maps as you might expect, though screen space occlusion issues at least aren't a concern. I initially thought this might be a planar reflection technique, but we have much better footage to evaluate now than we did some months ago. Plus, the water surface itself is broken up by waves, reacts to bomb-bombs, and foams up in stormy weather. It's a very convincing depiction of water overall, and really makes you pine for a modern-day wave race. Mario Kart 8 had a more transparent water surface without much of a Fresnel effect or detailed reflections. There was a compelling gameplay reason for those rendering choices, given its underwater racing sections. But I do feel like World looks superior here, and has a much more lively water depiction. The quality of the materials in Mario Kart World is generally on a different level as well. This comes down to a few factors. Texture resolution is typically higher, and techniques like normal mapping are more liberally used. Surfaces appear to have a fine-grained specular response, especially on smooth metals and woods, with blurred specular highlights on rougher surfaces. And surfaces like this rainbow road use more complex shaders, giving them a more eye-catching appearance. Overall, the game seems to have adopted a physically based rendering approach, improving the fidelity of materials relative to the more primitive Mario Kart 8. The actual geometric density of the models is a bit conservative at times, though there are still obvious improvements relative to 8. There's less stinginess when it comes to representing curved surfaces, for instance, and characters in the stands are fully 3D now, unlike in Mario Kart 8, which used a mix of 3D and 2D bystanders. Interestingly though, these NPCs always face the camera, which we can more clearly observe in Mario Kart World's photo mode. Plus, the playable characters and carts pack plenty of polygonal detail. The last note I wanted to touch on here comes down to the style of the game. Nintendo cast the difference between Mario Kart's 8 and World as a distinction between sleek and playful styles, and I think that's reflected in the final product. There's the obvious UI distinctions, as World evolves 8's tech-centric Windows arrow-like stylings into something more organic and alive. But I think you see the most obvious differences in the racers themselves. Karts squash and stretch as they make turns, jump, and grind rails. In general, the karts appear less precisely controlled and more like they are about to lose traction and spin out of control. There's an exaggerated sense of weight transfer relative to Mario Kart 8 as a result, which looked a lot stiffer. The karts also exhibit a rounded off bubbly look with few straight lines. This styling fits really well with the rest of the game, with its looser handling, broader scope, and greater focus on naturalistic environments, just as Mario Kart 8's more technical leanings suited its anti-gravity focus and track-oriented gameplay. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, though World's approach is definitely more visually exciting. Also expect to see a much more interactive World relative to Mario Kart 8, as most bits of trackside detail have a convincing physics response to player collision, and grass gives way under the tread of kart tires. The world feels tactile and natural, without obvious gamey inconsistencies. Character models move a little more towards CGI stylings, though the changes differ a bit on a per-character basis. Most obviously, Donkey Kong and Peach sport substantial revisions to fall more in line with their movie counterparts. For the most part though, these are very familiar-looking avatars. And then there's performance and image quality. The image quality breakdown is fairly simple. You get 1080p in portable play and 1440p in docked play, with no signs of DRS in my testing in either mode. TV image quality is generally fine enough in my experience, holding up well on a 4K television set from a typical viewing distance. Docked mode also gets a touch of post-process image treatment to adjust the 1440p resolution. I think we're primarily looking at a light post-AA here. Handheld mode definitely fares a bit better though, despite its lower pixel count. There's no anti-aliasing of any kind here, so the 1080p pixel count maps perfectly onto the 1080p Switch 2 display. The panel itself isn't perfect here, with middling contrast, mediocre brightness, and a tendency to blur and smear detail, but that's not an issue with World itself. Mario Kart 8 in contrast packed a 1080p 720p split in docked and portable play respectively, so each mode had much fewer pixels than World. It's not a revelatory improvement to image quality, but World does look a lot cleaner, if still imperfect. Comparing the docked and portable modes briefly, they tend to look very similar. Distant LODs are a little less detailed in portable play, and cube map resolution is decreased, but they otherwise seem to more or less match. Performance is faultless as far as I can tell in my experience playing the game. reaching a locked 60 FPS in the content I tested. The only real exception comes down to photo mode, which hits a 30 FPS target instead. Likewise in portable mode it seems, but getting an immediate visual read on the game's update isn't really possible given its VRR panel technology. I counted frame by frame using 180 FPS camera capture and got a 60 FPS reading though, so I expect it generally runs at 60 FPS just like its docked counterpart. I didn't have the chance to test the game in split screen, but I tested World's game chat functionality with players from the Digital Foundry Discord, and there weren't any performance concerns. The update rate of the actual game chat feed is a little choppy at approximately 8 to 10 FPS, but the rendering of the actual 3D content is unaffected. Nintendo has flagged game chat performance concerns in their documentation, but at least in this case, it doesn't seem like there is any issue. World doesn't look amazing scaled down to a small window, but it otherwise works well. Loading times are fairly speedy, comparable to a lot of current-gen console titles on home platforms. I'm showing the game on internal storage here though. Cart and microSD loading times may differ. World does support HDR as well, with good results in TV mode. On the handheld screen, it doesn't really do much, as the Switch 2 LCD doesn't have the high brightness and fine-grained control needed for a good HDR picture. The display technically supports HDR, but it's not a true HDR experience in my view. Overall, Mario Kart World does sport some large visual updates relative to its immediate predecessor, and I do think it represents something that couldn't run in a satisfactory form on the original Switch unit. We didn't really see anything like this on Switch 1 at 60 FPS, which is the standard for a modern Mario Kart title. Nintendo is putting the additional margin of GPU power on Switch 2 to good use by piling on open-world rendering challenges while continuing to evolve the series' lighting, models, animation, and image quality. Any version of this game that would ship on Switch 1 would bear steep compromises that could make Mario Kart 8 a more visually pleasing game in comparison, which I suspect would prove very unappealing to prospective players. To close out the meat of this technical review, I want to take a quick look at track design and how it's changed for Mario Kart World. For all its open world flourishes, Mario Kart World is still a game built around distinctive tracks. Each circuit is based on a key area or theme, in classic Mario Kart fashion. Much of the Mario roster is represented here, with Peach, Wario, Mario, Luigi, Toad, Bowser, and Donkey Kong all earning their own raceways, plus tracks named after Boo's, Dry Bones, and Cheep Jeeps. Unlike Mario Kart 8, no other Nintendo properties appear here, so there's no Zelda, Animal Crossing, or Splatoon crossovers. Track design sensibilities have changed quite a bit for Mario Kart World, however, with a mix of changes to accommodate the game's new gameplay features and revised mechanics. Wario Shipyard is a great example. Relative to Mario Kart 7, a lot more of the track is navigable and playable, because players now ride on top of the water surface instead of beneath it. That makes it more suitable for 24-player play, though certain choke points still crowd players closely. And it makes the track more workable for World's somewhat looser handling. The track layout in broad strokes is basically the same, but it plays totally differently. I'm looking at Mario Kart 7 on an emulator here to provide a clearer look at its artwork. Graphically speaking, a lot has changed between these two entries. Mario Kart 7 relied on tried and true technologies when it launched in 2011, sticking with vertex lighting and diffuse texturing. It had to hit a 60 FPS framerate target on limited, primarily fixed function mobile hardware while rendering two views at the same time, constraining what could be realistically achieved. In Mario Kart World, we're teleporting several generations ahead in terms of graphics technologies, and we're getting a game that would be more comfortable on something like a last-gen home console. The tech has been dramatically pushed out, and the art has been revised heavily too. Its world iteration feels more consistent, without the same clash between high-tech raceways and low-tech castle areas in Mario Kart 7. It feels like a thoughtful artistic reinvention of this older circuit, rather than just a technical revamp. Dino Dino Jungle is another good example of an updated Mario Kart 7 circuit. The track sports a Jurassic Park aesthetic, as dinosaurs traipse around the destroyed Dino Dino laboratory. The same turns are replicated here, and key features like the water spouts remain. It just sports a very different appearance. On the gameplay side, the track has been broadened somewhat and quarter radii are expanded. The other Mario Kart 7 tracks feature more conservative artistic and gameplay tweaks. DK Pass has similar themes and a matching track layout, with the exception of an extended ramp section towards the end of the lap. It definitely has a more well-defined sensibility in its new incarnation, but it's similar to its forebear. That's also true for Shy Guy Bazaar and Airship Fortress, two more Mario Kart 7 derived tracks that aren't reinvented wholesale for Mario Kart World, either in layout or in theme. Both are hugely improved though by the application of additional technology and artistic effort, and Shy Guy Bazaar also packs extensive non-cup routes for open world play. The Wii-derived tracks largely match their Switch 2 counterparts. Toad's Factory looks truly beautiful now, but it still features conveyor belts, open-air construction, and a squared-off layout. Dry Desert is still very dry and still a desert, though it swaps pyramids for excavated ruins. Peach Beach appears very similar on the surface, with a matching artistic theme and first lap layout. Laps 2 and 3, though, take place on totally new sections of track, drastically changing the circuit. Quite a few of the game's tracks feature linear, non-repeating routes now, especially some of the more exciting original tracks. Moo Moo Meadows returns for Mario Kart 8, giving us a clear point of comparison with the most recent series entry. The two tracks mirror each other closely, though some world-specific tech shines through here, like the individual blades of grass in this shot. The interaction between Mario and the cow here also sticks out, with an explosive collision that gives the game a more interactive feel. I do like the fading evening sun in its Mario Kart 8 incarnation, which imparts a somewhat richer look, though that's primarily an artistic tweak. Sky High Sunday is another prominent Mario Kart 8 track, which looks totally transformed in its new incarnation. This is an entry from the controversial Booster Course Pass though, which converted low-fidelity Mario Kart Tour tracks for use in Mario Kart 8. It has a similar palette and theme, but clearly has been lavished with much more artist attention, producing a far richer visual experience. The base Mario Kart 8 Deluxe tracks still hold up reasonably well compared to their world counterparts, but I think Sky High Sunday sinks. It looks garish, the lighting quality is poor, textures lack detail, and environmental modeling is low polygon and low effort. The Booster Course Pass tracks were fine, I suppose, for a free mobile game, but were well below the standard of the base tracks. We see similar patterns with Mario Circuit 3, which features as part of a Mario 1, 2, and 3 medley course and world. It's still colorful and flat, in a callback to Super Mario Kart's Mode 7 based visuals, but it has the more sophisticated materials and lighting that typify World. Plus, you can see the environment draw well into the distance, which keeps you grounded in the game's open world fantasy. Choco Mountain has been revised the most of the three, with a new resource extraction theme and some layout changes. This is a great development, given how visually boring Choco Mountain was in the Booster Course Pass. This is the first high-fidelity art pass the course has ever seen, and Nintendo hasn't let it go to waste. But the most heavily revised track in the entire game is probably Wario Stadium. This track originally appeared on Mario Kart 64 and has never been remade until now. The layout and artistic theme of this track bears little resemblance to its 30-year-old inspiration, but that's probably for the best, and I think Nintendo has put this creative liberty to good use. The new tracks are delightful too. Bowser's Castle is a chaotic pyrotechnics show, with meteors raining down as you fly between sections of track suspended by electrical currents. Acorn Heights dwarfs the player with gigantic leaves, mushrooms, and fine greenery, and features a stunning aerial section. And Rainbow Road is a blistering adventure through the sky, with 4 prismatic segments that have their own unique appeal. This is the most visually appealing selection of courses to grace a Mario Kart title. There's really no other racing game on the market with this level of polish and creativity in every frame. It's an impressive artistic achievement, and each track feels in tune with the game's mechanics as well. Mario Kart 8 was, in a lot of ways, a perfected Mario Kart game. If you chart the evolution of Mario Kart from Super Mario Kart through to Mario Kart 7, each game built upon key elements of its predecessor. The initial Mode 7 based graphics evolved towards 3D polygonal visuals, the drift based gameplay was refined, split screen was introduced, retro courses were refurbished, online play was integrated, player counts were increased, tricking was added, the third-person camera was perfected, and tracks were split into ground, aerial, and aquatic sections. Then Mario Kart 8 came along. Its biggest shift was perhaps the move towards HD graphics, which elevated this series' visual presentation to new heights. Mario Kart 7's mechanics were supercharged with anti-gravity sections, tighter vehicle handling, and the reintroduction of bikes. It was still firmly track-based, but it offered much more content than prior entries, with a whopping 96 total tracks after the game's first DLC round and the Booster Course Pass. It was a summation of the series up until that point, the pinnacle of arcade racing action over 50-second laps. I think that's reflected in the game's monumental success as the best-selling racing game of all time. Unfortunately, that makes it a very hard game to top with a new series entry. Within the typical Mario Kart confines, short, concept-oriented tracks with modest player counts, there's little room to evolve the kart racer. A prospective sequel would need to break this gameplay mold to prove new and exciting to racing gamers. Mario Kart World does just that, by introducing a properly contiguous open world for the first time in series history. Each cup features an unbroken chain of track in the open world, with discrete courses connected by interlinking sections of road and trail. This has upsides as well as downsides. Each cup feels like an adventure, and there's far more unique track here than in prior Mario Kart titles. The discrete courses still feel a little more lively than the straightened interlinking sections though. The new Knockout Tour mode exploits the structure to create truly unbroken, single-lap race events without pauses between sections. It has a pulse-pounding elimination-style format that drives up the pressure as you proceed, but the racing layout is again perhaps a little less mechanically interesting as a result. World balances out those changes by doubling the player count, while altering collisions and item hits to be less punishing. Races feel appropriately frenetic as a result, with pretty wild scenes during online play in particular. It will take a while to figure out exactly how pleasing this balance is long term, but so far I found it really exciting. World also packs a free roam mode, which allows you to explore the open world at your leisure. The content here is a little sparse at the moment, primarily consisting of short P-switch missions that last about 20 seconds or so. Reportedly, there are hundreds of these missions scattered throughout the open world. I'm not sure how much enduring appeal they'll have though, in part because the in-game map doesn't indicate where you found P-switches or where future ones might reside, making it hard to progress efficiently. The map lacks detail in general, as it doesn't depict the game's road systems at all, only its natural features and course locations. Free roam gameplay is a nice change of pace from racing action, but don't expect a Forza Horizon-like list of activities here. That said, the open world is a joy to ride around in, even if at present there's not a ton of stuff to do. The driving mechanics have changed considerably from Mario Kart 8 as well, with less responsive turning and looser drifts. If you're looking for something more like 8, pick a lighter character, as the weight classes have more strongly attenuated handling differences in the world. And be sure to turn off automatic steering, which is enabled by default in the game's settings. Rail grinding and wall riding are also part of the experience, which can set up some cool maneuvers. After a couple days, I feel like I'm basically getting the hang of things, though getting properly positioned and primed for these actions requires a bit of forethought. So far, I've really enjoyed what I've played of World, and if my Mario Kart 8 playtime is anything to go by, I'll probably be racing in it for dozens if not hundreds of hours to come. It also feels like an amazing platform for new features and content expansions, which are undoubtedly coming if Mario Kart 8 is any indication. Personally, I'd love to see Nintendo add a 200cc speed class, a more detailed map, and more P-switch missions and other open-world content. A course expansion or landmass edition seems likely at some point, though there's plenty of racing track in the game for the time being. Mario Kart World is a tremendous accomplishment more than anything else. I'm seriously impressed by the scope of what Nintendo has achieved, delivering massive open-world scale with very few compromises, and revitalizing an aging series in the process. The moment-to-moment gameplay feels fantastic, Its concept is innovative, and it glimmers with Nintendo polish. Visually speaking, World offers some beautiful sights, with key rendering advances over prior Mario Kart games, though a lot of rendering power has gone into making the open world work. It's really the incredible quality of Nintendo's artistry that stands out most here, with the game's collection of new and revised courses proving a strong highlight. Plus, it packs good resolution and framerate metrics in portable and docked play, without the low internal resolutions that typify a lot of early Switch 2 software. I'm certain that Mario Kart World is going to move a lot of Switch 2 systems over the coming years, as it's up there with some of Nintendo's best. If you have the opportunity, I would strongly recommend giving it a shot. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for YouTube notifications. Check out the Patreon at digitalfoundry.net for exclusive and early access content and to get in touch use social media. Thanks for watching.